Picking what the greatest year in movies is a basically impossible task. There are so many movies that come out every single year, and there are so many fantastic movies that come out every single year. And so every year has all these amazing movies. It's hard to pick one definitive best year. There's also the fact that there are countless movies, and I haven't seen them all, and I definitely have a bias towards modern movies, considering I've seen more films from the 21st century than I have from the 30s and the 40s. So it's hard to judge comparing 2019 with 1941, because for the year 2019, I've seen like 40 plus movies from that year, and from 1941, I've seen 4 or 5. But as I continue to watch movies and my taste grows and evolve, I feel like every 5 years I could remake this video and remake this list, and it might be a different one just from watching more and more older movies. Judging an entire year of movies is pretty tough because even though thousands of amazing movies come out, 20 times more terrible movies come out. But I don't think a year's quality is determined by the amount of good minus the amount of bad. I think it's just determined by the amount of good, because I don't think Pooh, Blood and Honey coming out really makes 2023 a worse year for movies, especially because you don't have to watch that movie, you could just watch the good ones. There are so many amazing years in movies, and it's really hard to narrow it down to just 5, so here are a couple honorable mentions. 1963, 1979, 1962, 1999, 2019, and 1968. Now on to my top 5. At number 5, I have the year 1954. The 50s were a very pivotal moment in cinema history, with the Hays Code in Hollywood waning in influence, so the boundaries of filmmaking were being pushed a little bit more. Also in 1950, Akira Kurosawa's film Rashomon was released, which increased popularity for international films and made film become an international and global sensation where more foreign films were being watched everywhere. The 1950s also had the old masters of the 30s and 40s still in their prime, flexing their skills while also ushering in a new generation of filmmakers. 1954 is a prime example of that mastery being portrayed in the 50s. Legendary filmmaker Alfred Hitchcock directed 2 films in 1954, both of them being absolutely incredible. The first one being one of his most well-known films, Rear Window. Rear Window stars the incredible James Stewart and Grace Kelly, and it is about a man who is bedbound from an injury, and he just watches his neighbors out his rear window, and he believes that he's seen a murder. The film employs Hitchcock's common theme of voyeurism, with our main character staring at people out of his window. It's also a crime film with mystery and tension in it, and it is very well known for some of the most incredible sets ever put to film. Hitchcock's other film from 1954 is the incredible Dial M for Murder. Dial M for Murder is another mystery crime film starring Grace Kelly. It's about a man who plans the murder of his wife, but when that murder goes wrong, then the man has to cover up his tracks and make sure it doesn't lead back to him. Dial M for Murder perfectly encapsulates Hitchcock's ability to create tension through his mastery of dramatic irony. 1954 doesn't end with just Hitchcock, though. If we go over to Japan, the most legendary filmmaker of all time, Akira Kurosawa, released arguably his magnum opus, Seven Samurai. Seven Samurai dominates pretty much every single greatest films of all time list. If you look on any single one of these lists, I promise you Seven Samurai is among them. It's the quintessential team-up movie. Every single movie after it that has a group of people teaming up together, it's pretty much based on Seven Samurai, including the Avengers, including a very direct remake, The Magnificent Seven, which is the same plot as Seven Samurai, just in a western. Seven Samurai wasn't the only masterpiece to come out of Japan in 1954, though, because one of my favorite films of all time, Godzilla, was released as well. Godzilla spawned the longest running film franchise of all time with 37 films and still going, and the original 1954 Godzilla is one of my favorite films ever made. I think modern audiences have a weird relationship with Godzilla because I think they believe he is pretty goofy and not to be taken seriously because of some of the later films in the Godzilla series, but the original Godzilla is a deeply mournful movie and it's just absolutely a masterpiece. There are even more films from 1954, like On the Waterfront, which won Best Picture that year and was actually one of the best pictures of that year. The Academy actually got this one right. And there's plenty more from 1954, like Federico Fellini's La Strada, Misaguchi's Sancho the Bailiff, Johnny Guitar, Journey to Italy, the list goes on. At number 4, I have another year from the 1950s, 1959. There are a lot of great Hollywood films from 1959, like one of the greatest comedies, Some Like It Hot, the incredible epic Ben-Hur, and Hitchcock's North by Northwest. But I think the real draw from this year, from 1959, is the international features. An incredibly pivotal film in the French New Wave movement, The 400 Blows, was released, directed by Francois Truffaut. The 400 Blows is a fantastic coming-of-age story that really gets at the heart of the difficulties of being a kid and growing up in the modern world. The greatest trilogy in all of cinema, Masaki Kobayashi's The Human Condition trilogy, had the first 2 of the trilogy come out in 1959, and that is already enough to cement this as one of the best years. And also, the second greatest trilogy in cinema, Satyajit Ray's Apu trilogy, had its last and climactic ending with Apar Sansar come out in 1959, concluding an incredible coming-of-age story that spans a trilogy and spans a man's entire life. One of the great masters, Yasujiro Ozu, also directed a film in 1959, and that film is Good Morning, which is one of my favorite films from him. Good Morning is a very simple film about 2 young boys that go on a silent strike when their parents refuse to buy them a TV. It's incredibly cute and very heartwarming, and it's just such a great bad day cure, and it's one of my favorite happy movies. Robert Bresson, a director so impactful that I made an entire video talking about him and his impact, directed a film in 1959, and that's his incredible film Pickpocket. At number 3, I have yet another year from the 1950s, but I promise this is the last one. At number 3, I have the year 1957. 1957 is the year that has the most amount of films on the Letterboxd Top 250 by a pretty large margin, which doesn't necessarily mean it's the best year, but it is a good metric. If you ask most people what the greatest year in cinema is, I feel like 1957 will be an extremely common answer. Starting off strongly with 12 Angry Men, the second highest rated film on Letterboxd, 12 Angry Men is an incredible courtroom drama about a man who convinces 11 other people on the jury that the boy might be innocent. It's a masterclass in framing and blocking, being all set in one singular room with 12 people in it, and yet the camera directs your eye in such a perfect way. One of Stanley Kubrick's best films, Paths of Glory, was also released in 1957, a scathing anti-war film about a general who refuses orders to do this suicide mission and then gets made an example of. It's a poignant critique on the horrors of war and of blind obedience. Another film from the master himself, Akira Kurosawa, we have Throne of Blood, released in 1957 as well. This is Kurosawa's Macbeth adaptation set in feudal Japan, and is just one of the best films ever made. The Academy doesn't always nominate the best film for Best Picture, but they did a pretty good job in 1957, with the Best Picture being The Bridge on the River Kwai, one of my favorite Best Picture winners. The Bridge on the River Kwai is a film about prisoners of war that are forced to build a bridge over this river, and their train's going to bring supplies over to the enemy. And it is such an interesting film because they try to sabotage the bridge, but they can't make it too obvious. But then some of them get this kind of Stockholm syndrome with the people that are imprisoning them. The list for 1957 is incredible, and it just keeps going, like the incredible and underrated masterpiece, The Cranes Are Flying from the Soviet Union, one of Yasujiro Ozu's most underrated films, Tokyo Twilight. There are also 2 Ingmar Bergman outings in 1957 with Wild Strawberries and The Seventh Seal. Federico Fellini released one of his best films with Knights of Cabiria. The Sweet Smell of Success has one of the best and wittiest screenplays ever written, and the list just keeps going for this year. Finally leaving the 1950s with my number 2 pick, we are going to the 1960s. The second best year in cinema for me is 1966. I've only given out 55-star films, and 3 of them are from 1966, more than any other year. Starting off with my first 5-star film from 1966, we have Ingmar Bergman's masterpiece Persona, an incredible abstract expression about identity, the subconscious, and masking. The next 5-star masterpiece from 1966 is a film by the greatest director of all time, Andrei Tarkovsky's Andrei Rublev. Andrei Rublev is a fictionalized story of the real-life Russian icon painter Andrei Rublev. It's a rumination on theology and what it means to believe in God, but not in a very preachy way, but it's also a realist historical depiction of Russia's identity in the medieval ages. It uses Christianity not as a moral compass to preach to the audience, but uses it rather as a source of identity for the Russian people. And the third masterpiece from 1966 is Robert Bresson's Alcazar Balthazar, one of the most somber films ever made. I think it's a film every single person should watch at least once. It's one that really makes you reflect on your own empathy, and I think it just makes you a better person after you watch it. Outside of those three masterpieces, there are still so many incredible films from 1966, like the leftist revolutionary film The Battle of Algiers, Black Girl, the debut feature of the amazing Ousmane Sembène, which is the first feature film directed by a sub-Saharan African director. The legend himself, Satyajit Ray, released his film Hero. Clint Eastwood became an international icon with The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Daisies is an underrated and esoteric feminist comedy that I think so many people need to see. Sword of Doom is a fantastic samurai film that's one of the best at depicting the descent into madness. There's also The Face of Another, which is a Japanese film about identity and what we reveal to the public and our own individuality. Wings is an underrated war film from the great Larissa Shepitko. And keeping with this theme of underrated, in 1966, one of the most underrated films from one of my favorite directors of all time, Agnes Varda, was released, and that's The Creatures, a film I need every person watching this to watch. But in my opinion, the greatest year in all of cinema is not from the 50s, and it's not from the 60s, it's actually from the 90s, and it's going to be 1997. The batting average for 1997 is genuinely so insane. Starting off with some lightweight entries from this year, we have the scathing political satire Starship Troopers. There's also the incredibly unique and atmospheric Eve's Bayou that I really love. Paul Thomas Anderson released his major hit Boogie Nights. And of course, one of the biggest films of all time, James Cameron's Titanic, was also released in 1997. One of the most popular favorite movies and the film that launched Matt Damon and Ben Affleck's career was released, Good Will Hunting. And we aren't even at the heavy hitters yet. 1997 also brought us the living legend Wong Kar-wai's intimate and daring queer romance film, Happy Together. Michael Haneke released one of the most grueling and disturbing films of all time, Funny Games. And we aren't even at the best films yet. One of the saddest films ever made was released in 1997, which is the poignant Life is Beautiful, a Holocaust film about a father who tries to brighten the spirits of his son while they're in a concentration camp. 1997 was a really great year for animation as well. Princess Mononoke, arguably Studio Ghibli's best film, was released, one of the most visually masterful films about human greed and our destruction of the planet and the environment. Another animated classic from 1997 is Satoshi Kon's Perfect Blue, an abstract and surrealist experience about a pop star turned actor who has to deal with dual identities and a dangerous stalker. Perfect Blue is one of the greatest animated movies. It's also the major inspiration for a lot of these mind-bending movies and a lot of these surrealist movies like Inception and Donnie Darko. Neon Genesis Evangelion is possibly the best anime series, and the film sequel of the show, Neon Genesis Evangelion, The End of Evangelion, is one of the best animated films ever, and possibly the single most visually stunning film ever made. And we still aren't even done with 1997. One of the titans of cinema, David Lynch, released one of his best films, Lost Highway, a surrealist masterpiece. Kiyoshi Kurosawa also released his magnum opus, the atmospheric horror film Cure, a dreary and unnerving watch about a detective trying to solve these murders. And the last film I want to mention here for 1997 is what I'd argue is the best film of the year, and that's Abbas Kiarostami's Taste of Cherry. Taste of Cherry is a masterpiece about a man who wants to kill himself, but he wants to employ somebody to check his body, make sure he's dead, and then to bury him afterwards. But what happens is they try to convince him not to, and he has all these incredible conversations with these really interesting characters. Taste of Cherry is one of those films that makes you want to talk to your neighbor, makes you want to have emotional and deep connections with people, and it really makes you feel all of these emotions so deeply. It's a beautiful appreciation of life, community, and the people around us, and it is the best film from the best year in cinema. As I've said, it's an impossible task to denote the single best year in cinema, because there will always be more films to see. But that's what makes it more exciting, because now every new film I watch is going to add to this list, and I'll see in 5 years how this list changes. Now I know nobody agreed with my exact top 5, so I want to know what you think the best year in cinema was.